Good morning, Al.
Good morning, Stacy. I just had a very powerful revelation not 20 minutes ago, and so I wanted to request that you start this podcast before we go through our normal greeting, because I realized how much I look forward to these, and I thought, well, why do I look forward to these? And I thought it's because I love Stacy Harding. Well, what does it mean that I love Stacy Harding? I see the Christ in you, Stacy. I see that part of you that is a part of God, the Christ consciousness, that you don't see because your ego gets in the way, like all of our egos, with a story of all the evidence that you have as to the separate nature that you exist, separate from everything else. And for me, that's really what Christ was talking about, was more than worship him as a person or the Son of God or these conceptual things. It's an experience of Christ consciousness that we're capable of. And the reason love is such a powerful thing is that it's not an emotion, it's a recognition of the divinity in someone else that they don't see. And when we say to people, I love you, it's usually in our level 3 ego taken as a declaration of an emotional state. But what I really see about you is you're so much greater than you've ever had a story to allow yourself to see, because you have all this experience as Stacy Harding, and this guy that grew up in Wichita and, did this big stuff in the business and then went through the divorce and went through the work stuff. And now you're starting new things. But through all that, I see this really pure hearted guy who's doing his best to really kind of operate in alignment with God, with the Bible, with Christ, but not in a conceptual way, in an experiential way. So I thought, all right, so I see what it is about Stacy that is God, and that's what I mean when I say I love you. And by seeing that, it opens up a place in me where I realize that same dynamics going on with me and everyone else, that we're all lost in the illusion of our level 3 ego that's busy constantly creating a story of why we aren't really love worthy. And it really is the way the ego has us be blind to that part of us that is God. And it's really what this trip of being a human being is about, is to discover that we aren't who we think we are, because the ego is a case of false identity. So I'm grateful that we have the relationship we do, because I get to hold up a mirror that hopefully one day you will try on seeing that, well, you know what, I am love worthy, and I am a child of God, and I am doing my best with what I have to work with. And the enemy is not me, and it's not that I've had these experiences and I've failed at this or succeeded at that, or people thought I was more than I was, or all those stories our ego makes up to try to justify why we can have conditional love for ourselves. I'm here to tell you, dude, as a guy who's studied human beings for 73 years, out of my own search to try to not kill myself and to find some reason to keep going, that it lifts me up to recognize who you are, because then it helps me see outside of my own ego story that gets in the way of that place that we share and that all people share, of being a part of divinity. And that's really what the human condition's about, is getting past that illusion. So I just wanted to start today in that way, to say, you won't accept it, you'll be polite, you'll feel apologetic that, I've thought these things because they're way above your pay scale and you don't deserve it, and all the things, because your ego right now will be desperately scrabbling to discount, diminish, and change what I've said. But Stacy, you're a very pure expression of Christ consciousness, and I'm really grateful that in this latter stage of our lives, we got to kind of run across each other in this way, because we spent 25 years across the room, sort of issuing a toast to somebody that we were trying to figure out whether he was with us or against us, and what he could do for me or hurt me. And how delicious this experience that somebody like you comes along that's so authentic and so humble and yet so giving and generous with what you're trying to do. So I'm grateful for you, Stacy.
You. Wow. So if you're one of our watchers of our podcast and you're seeing this right now, I don't know if you're feeling it, but my goodness, I have the goosebumps and I'm like, wow, I'm almost speechless. And yet I know it's authentically from your heart, Al, and I'm grateful for it. And it is perhaps some validation of what I'm trying to be, right?
Yeah.
And so with my faith, I am trying to emulate Christ, and I'm very imperfect about it, but maybe there's some glimmers here and there. I was at a national conference this past weekend that I think lines up perfectly with what you were just talking about. And there was a keynote speaker, and he was talking about how we go through life and we measure what we have accomplished. And for business leaders, oftentimes that's the scoreboard, right? Is what do we achieve, what do we accomplish. But he said this. He said, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? And I know everybody's reaction was, well, maybe I'm getting older and all these things. And his point was, if you're looking at the mirror and you're seeing yourself, you've missed the point. And the point is, when you look in the mirror, who are all the people that have been major influence in your life do you see in that mirror? Because they've helped shape exactly who you've become and who I've become. And Al, I see you in my mirror big time.
Mm.
And he went on to say another thing that I thought was even more an awakened position. He said, it's awesome if you can get to the point where you're looking in the mirror and you see all the other people that have had an influence in your life. What might be even a bigger thing is to consider, when other people are looking in their mirror, do they see you?
Mm.
And I love that idea of just the impact and the influence of relationships, because we're in this journey together, and it's not. And I feel this about our relationship, Alan. I think, in some respects, I look back sometimes. I say, what a shame that we didn't start at this depth of our relationship 25 years ago, or 30 even at this point. And yet, it is just perfect at this time.
Yeah.
And maybe it wouldn't be as rich as it is now. So thank you for those comments. And I will tell you this, I feel equally that way towards you. And I just can't believe the impact that you've had on my life. And those words of encouragement, I know you mean them from your heart, and I accept them that way. And I need them. And, I wish I could say I'm at level 4 and I'm beyond my own self-consciousness, but I'm not. I'm still a human being, and I'm working through those things. You and I were chatting by text this morning a little bit about a couple of subjects to talk about, and it just lines up perfectly with this and the idea of letting go. For me, I'm thinking about, how do I look in all of my relationships with a positive regard for people. I heard something this morning too. If you're easily offended, um, you'll find it all the time. If you're looking for it, you'll find it. And I want to, that's part of letting go, I think, is letting go of the expectations of how people interact with you and what they may be giving you or not giving you. So thank you for starting. We were talking about this in past, uh, I guess, recordings of podcasts, is like, we should start the camera the minute we start talking, not because we've done some wonderful interview or introduction. It's because our conversations, folks, are always like this. It's not like, hey, Al, how's the weather in Tennessee today?
Right.
we just don't have that surface level of relationship. I hope I feel so fortunate that I have you as a friend and a mentor, and I hope that people watching, they have that, and if they don't have it, they seek it out. They should seek it out with us. But thank you for that intro. So where do we go from here?
You know, I was thinking yesterday about a topic that I ended up creating a post around that I thought might be a good way to kind of share this, because I think it's I actually had a group call that I do every week with this group of people, and we had this topic, and it was extremely well received. And so I got to thinking about the people in our life that it's time to let go of, that have had a phase of our life, and yet how traumatic that often is, and how often we have to make somebody the bad guy and we have to, and typically it's the other person, and we start creating a case of why, well, blah, 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 you know. And so I thought about, well, that's a level 3 approach because, and so I wrote about it, and I thought might be worthy of a topic. Um, we will all face a situation in life where our time with someone has run its course and it's no longer a healthy relationship. It may be a former friend, a former spouse, a relative, or any other kind of relationship. In these situations, our level 3 ego tends to want to protect itself by judging, labeling, rejecting, or demonizing the other person, but that is dishonoring the connection once enjoyed. Level 4 values soul, honors the past connection, and treats this evolution of relationship with respect and even gratitude for what was rather than tearing the other person down. Rather than turning on that now misaligned person, they let them drift off over the horizon of contact like a ship over the ocean's horizon of time, letting the relationship slowly atrophy naturally. But they continue to honor them as having been a blessing to the time and experiences shared, with love and good wishes for their future growth and happiness. Sometimes the relationships that have run their course hold the greatest lessons of unconditional love. Be a leader of love as much at the end of relationships as in the beginning, because it was never about who was right and who was wrong. It was and is about what character gets revealed in all phases of the relationship, including its in the final chapter. And my point to this is that as I look at moments in my life where I've had, my heart broken because the girlfriend chose another guy, or maybe I have a friend that now sees me in a certain way because I may vote differently than they do. So now I'm whatever story they have about it. My first response is to kind of, well, let me tell you what's wrong with you, kind of thing in my mind. But I realize the proudest moments of my life actually are in moments like that when I choose to take the high road. When I got fired from the company I built, I chose to request to stick around for 2 weeks to make my departure easier on the people left behind and even for the benefit of the very people that fired me. When I've had girlfriends break my heart, I've written them letters of, don't worry about it. I'm glad we have what we had. Have a great life. I think we have a chance, maybe one of the best chances in our life, when we have relationships that are no longer optimal. And as we get older, I think we get more selective about who we spend our time with. I think we have really great opportunities in the moment when we realize the relationship with someone has run its course, to let them have their path and journey and drift over the horizon of space and time without having to make a big event out of it or to try to make them wrong, because that normally echoes and keeps going as a karmic thing in our heads. Whereas we have a chance to really embody unconditional love once they have found we're no longer worthy of their love, or maybe the relationship has become toxic, or maybe they're energy vampires or they're dysfunctional. But those are the moments when our ego tends to want to, all right, here we go, let's get this person. But really, our level 4 could say, this is my greatest moment where God's watching, the God within me and the God outside of me is watching to see how I'm going to choose to respond. Because if we can take someone who we have a broken relationship with and we can treat them with unconditional love, that's our moment when I think we are tested to see whether we got the memo on arguably the most important level 4 value that we can embody, which is removing the conditionality from love, even the condition of continuing to be a part of my life. So the nobility and the honor and the integrity and the wisdom and the courage to operate as a reflection of the love worthiness of other people, as a reflection of the light of God into other people, even when they've hurt you, even when they've no longer want to be a part of your life, or you no longer want them to be a part of yours. Those are perhaps arguably the biggest moments where we get to see how far along we are on the mountain of consciousness and what we have to work on next if we perhaps can't pull that off in an authentic way that isn't just artifice. What are your thoughts, brother?
Well, I was thinking of myself and my own reaction as you were describing that, and I've often found myself, Al, getting sad about relationships that have basically come to an end. I'm thinking mostly about professional relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both spent long periods of time in the same organizations, and I had a particularly long one and very little connection with the folks that I spent nearly 25 years with.
Right.
And I could be sad about that and say, what a shame. Instead, I can, when I move beyond that and I can start getting my ego out of the way or my feelings out of the way, I celebrate that I got to journey that long with them and that we actually shaped each other on a daily basis, whether we knew it or not.
Yeah.
And we supported each other, and we didn't always get along, but we were a team. And there's periods of time where teams serve their purpose, and it's time for a move on. It doesn't mean that you couldn't reconnect, and years later, and it feels like you never weren't. Those are the kind of relationships that I hope to have and feel I do have. But I am sad sometimes when I think about, man, did I do something wrong that we didn't stay in contact? And I look and I reflect. I'm like, well, I'm kind of the worst at it. I get busy and do the things I'm doing, and I don't make the effort to maybe stay in touch. And probably that's self-demeaning when maybe it's just not meant to be at this point,
Mm-hmm.
because there's enough energy that has to go to the present
Right.
and the people that are in the journey today. And so I thank you for sharing that, because that gives me a little bit of freedom in my mindset about that. And we all make mistakes, and we could do more to connect after we're maybe not involved on a daily basis, but it doesn't mean that it was ever bad or wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I suspect one of the great opportunities of people that we've lost contact with, old friends that have just time and space. I think one of the great things we can do that will really make a difference in their life and even our own is to reach out and just let them know what you see about them as their level 4. I think the real art of human relationships is not taking people at face value of their looks, their accomplishments, their wealth, their what they're doing for you, any of that. I think if we see each other as the values that that person is putting out to the world, which they're usually unaware of,
Mhm.
and we can acknowledge those values and we can reach out, especially to relationships that are now no longer there. What would it mean to you if, and we won't name him, but let's say a key person you used to work with that was your boss reached out to you out of the blue and just said, Stacy, look, I know things went the way they went and we parted ways, but I got to tell you, brother, I watched you for 25 years and you were always somebody that brought spirit to the organization. You brought love, you brought kindness, you brought understanding. It would not have been what it was without you. And I don't think I and we did a good enough job letting you know how much of an impact you had on all of us. And you don't need to respond, but I wanted you to know that I finally recognized that, and I apologize for not recognizing it sooner. Now, what would it mean to you? What would it mean to anyone to get that call out of the blue? So why don't we do that for other people?
Exactly. And you've actually, Al, when I started working with IMP and you a couple of years ago now, you encouraged me to do that in a number of relationships, and I did. And what was interesting about the responses, first of all, you know how it made me feel to do that?
Yeah, it
You do
feels
know.
great.
You do know. I'm like,
Yeah,
man, I went high. I went as
yeah,
high as I possibly can. And that truthfully was enough.
yeah.
And I got some responses, and I got others that weren't responded. And the responses that came back were a validation that it meant something to them, but it didn't make me feel better that they responded.
Right,
I already had the fruit of that,
right.
and others didn't. But I also know that in some way God was pleased, if nothing else, that I
That's
did.
right. Right.
And so I want to do more and more of it, and I want to be an encourager. And I think, you and I have both been given a gift of encouragement in my mind. I think we do have that. I'm not saying that boastfully, but it makes a difference, folks. And if we can drop a positive note or a phone call, and a lot of times you're not going to get a hold of them, it's going to be a voicemail or it's going to be a note you sent. You've given stories about notes you sent that have actually saved people's lives. And we just never know when that kind of kindness, and I think it comes back to a little bit about what we talked about, unconditional regard for others, and we call it unconditional love. And if we can look at all the people that we've had experiences with, irrespective of how they might have come to a conclusion, and not just forget all the bad stuff that you might have thought you had at the time. And in all those relationships that you and I have talked about, I don't remember the negative challenges that we might have shared. I don't. I just remember that was a blessing in my life. That was a blessing. I pray I was a blessing to them. And so, I mean, all of a sudden, these feelings that we tried not to trust too much of joy and happiness and peace and forgiveness and self worth, they come flooding in.
Yeah.
And so, when you are that way towards others, and you do it every single moment of every day, Al, the this the I guess the nurturing of our soul and our spirit is deep from that. It is for me. I experience it, and I feel
I,
like those are God moments. I really do. I feel
yeah.
like that's experiencing God's. I'm a believer in the Holy Spirit, that it's here, and I'm experiencing it because I couldn't get there on my own because of my ego level 3.
And I think it's why people either don't respond or don't know how to respond because the ego, it's sort of like the ego gets caught with its pants down because it's like, uh-oh, it's Stacy is end running me because he's talking directly to my soul. I've got to whisper to Stacy, this is a con. He wants something from you, or he's just trying to apologize for that time he screwed you, or whatever. The ego is desperately scrambling to try to make up stories, and it doesn't really know how to respond because in the face of the light, the mold dies. And
Mhm.
the ego is the mold, and the light is the God consciousness, the Christ consciousness we all have. It's actually one of the reasons, and we don't get into religion or spiritual traditions, but I've been thinking recently, one of the reasons Eastern spiritual traditions have resonated so well for me is the Western spiritual traditions, which I'm not making a comment on validity here, but
Sure.
the Western spiritual traditions, the Abrahamic religions, the religions of the book, I've realized are apocalyptic. They begin with the premise that you are a sinner, you're flawed, you therefore need a savior, and therefore you're separate from God, and you need to kind of earn your way there by honoring the Savior and working through the Savior. And it's a belief based spirituality. They're even called believers. No comment, no judgment about that. That's what that is. A lot of that didn't work for me because, frankly, I already felt flawed enough. I didn't want to start out with the premise that I was already in the hole. Shit, I know I'm in the hole and I'm dog shit. Please don't reinforce it. And now I've got a long shot that I can get out of being dog shit if I just, do this or that. But when I found the eastern side of the mountain, I realized it was really the opposite. In the East, you don't start out in the hole as a sinner having to kind of be forgiven by God. You're already God. You've just forgotten because your ego has obscured it. And your job is therefore to awaken that part of you that's already God. It's an inside experiential thing, not an outside belief thing. It's not apocalyptic. It's really the whole thing with reincarnation is you keep coming back and trying again and climbing a little higher. And it's not like that's a great trip. It's not like that's enjoy. You're going to go through 100,000 lifetimes of pain and suffering until you get fed up with the ego trip of creating pain and suffering and you finally do the work and let go of it. That's the East. I'm not making a comment either one of them is right or wrong. I think people need to follow what works for them. My wife is a born again Christian. And so for her, what works for her is that side of the mountain. And so my job is to, and I do encourage that and reinforce that because for her, that's how she accesses divinity. Our job is to figure out how to access a connection with divinity And I think that's a personal thing. I think we all need to kind of figure that one out. I don't need to convince you or vice versa that you need to be on my trip. My job, if I think maybe the greatest measure of how I'm doing with even recognizing that there is divinity is how well I support Stacy in being an authentic Christian who practices what Christ said and doesn't just parrot it so that he gets credit for believing in Christ. I think to believe in Christ is to do your best to be Christ every day. And there's a big part of us that says, yeah, but you can't do that. He's the son. Yeah, okay, so you can lock yourself out from it. But what if you let all that go and said, just do what he said to do, and don't be worried about whether other people are labeling you as a this or that. And that's frankly why St. Francis is my favorite Christian saint, because he was so humble, but through that humility, he simply tried to emulate Jesus. And as a result, he was, I think, a miracle worker, and I think he was a great example. So my point here, Stacy, is that I wanted to have this podcast this morning to be an acknowledgement of my recognition that you have always been more than you've seen yourself to be, and you now are mindfully, consciously um, doing a lot of things in your life. You have these clinics that are helping heal people. You're doing IMP work and helping heal people in other ways. And I wanted to take the opportunity this morning to kind of say, for one moment in your life, I want you to hear truthfully and honestly from another human being, I see God in you, and I see the way you operate that you don't see, and because of the reasons none of us see that in ourselves. And yet the real game is we have to learn how to love ourselves without thinking that's a lack of humility. And my opinion is the way we do that is simply by recognizing we have a dark force within us that gets in the way of that is called ego, that has us believe that we're separate. I'll say one last thing, then I'll shut up and let you, respond to all this. I had this thought the other day about the way life works spiritually, that it starts with the ocean of God, the ocean of consciousness. Evaporation occurs and it becomes the clouds that are sort of the creative element. And out of the clouds, they condense into raindrops. The raindrop falling from the cloud to the ocean is a life. It's your life, it's my life. And in that moment, the raindrop falling through the air feels alone and feels separate and feels like it's alone in the universe and in the world because it's got air all around it. But and the length of time of a life is how high the cloud is and how far the drop has to fall. But once the drop hits the ocean, it re-engages with its universality of being in God and realizes that the premise of being separate was really a temporary relative state, but in an absolute way was never the case. The raindrop was always water, as was the ocean. And whether you follow a one and done model that it's a Western tradition of heaven hell, or a reincarnational model where that cycle continues over and over is irrelevant to me. What is relevant is recognizing you are already God, a part of God, as the ocean of God. You just have forgotten in the process of being a raindrop. What are your thoughts?
Well, folks, if you don't think that's profound, oh my gosh, did that just come to you out, or that's something that
I thought of it yesterday.
yeah, so that means you were having a conversation with God because He's putting that in your mind. That is profound. And folks, I want to just demonstrate something to you. We don't talk about particular faith and religions and what you should or shouldn't believe, but I want you to see such an example of Al and I don't agree on our beliefs about some of this stuff, and it doesn't matter
That's right.
because what we both come to understand in our life, it's not our job to convince each other of something.
Right, right.
It's not my job to say, Al, you're right on that or you're wrong on that, and you should listen to Reese more. And he's not trying to say, well, you guys are, you're listening to a myth or whatever. That's not the point.
Right.
what if the world could coexist and collaborate and love each other regardless of what the mental images of beliefs we have? And
Yeah.
so I think Al and I are a great model and demonstration of unconditional love and regard. I could not say, I could never say a negative thing about Al. And the reason is I can't have a negative thought about Al. It's impossible for me to have a negative thought about this man because he is such a giver of love and life.
Mm.
And man, I know you're not perfect, Al. I get it. But brother, there's nothing that I can say, oh, I wish I would do that, or I wish I would be this. Oh my gosh, you're just a gift. And if you haven't seen this from the two of us today, we kind of like each other. and it's because of this mutual respect for life. And I did want to point something out in our previous section about just having impact in other people's lives and encouraging them. If you do give something good to someone that maybe you weren't in an ending harmonious relationship with, don't worry about expecting something in return because they may not be a student of life the way you've become.
Mm-hmm.
And when Al says, I've been a student of mankind and humans for 73 years, he's right. And I've tried to emulate that in my 62 and a half years. But other people don't necessarily think at that level that they're trying to learn. They're trying to just exist or get by, or they're trying to find something inside that makes them happy and feel worthwhile. And that is level 3 ego going on. And it's just a lot stronger in some human beings than it is others. But we can help them by just showing them the way through love, unconditionally, with positive regard for them, no
Yeah.
matter what.
Yeah, and as part of this dialogue, brother, we were coming back from dinner last night, and we went with my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law is 93 and healthy and vibrant and wonderful. Really, boy, an ideal, authentic Christian woman, just amazing human being. I admire her to this moon. And so we're in the car and we're coming back. We're probably, 25 minutes from home. We're coming along. And Reese said, we had our 47th anniversary last week. And, like a goofball, I forgot about it. Of course, I go, okay, here's a card. And I'm thinking, gosh, what a dolt, right? But we're coming back from dinner. And she said, you're really a good person. And I thought, wow. And she said some more. And, we don't do that with each other. We don't do that. And I'd say that generally with people we're familiar with, we kind of take them for granted. So I told her this morning, right before we did this podcast, thank you. That really meant a lot to me. And frankly, you've done that a few times over the last few days. And I think we need to do more of that both ways because we have a limited number of tomorrows. And we so often take other people for granted until it's too late. And so, one of the things I'd like to put out there as part of our podcast today, brother, for people to think about is we talked about relationships that are no longer appropriate and you need to let go of, and how to do that in a noble, honorable, loving way that can help you and the other person, even though you won't be in each other's lives maybe ever again. But for the people that are in your life on a day to day basis, don't make them into animated furniture. Don't take them for granted as somebody that'll be here tomorrow. They won't be. There'll be a day they won't be here tomorrow. And take the time to see them not as their personality, their accomplishments, what they're doing for you, how pretty they're, ugly they are, and all of that. Take the time to ask yourself, what are the values that I experience from Stacy Harding? Really? I mean, even if I wasn't going to say anything to anybody, what would I think of? And I think, well, he's humble. He is faithful, full of faith. He's loving, and he's a selfless giver. Okay, well, if that's how I see you, and it is how I see you, to me, that's who you really are. You're not the story you have about who you think you are. And maybe the greatest thing I can do for you is to introduce you to your real self by acknowledging what I see you as based on what values I experience from you. If we did that in the world more often, and especially for the people that have been with us for a long time that we take for granted, I want to take the time to tell my sons why I admire them and why I'm proud of them, and not because of accomplishment, not grades, not money, not who they married or any of that, but just because of who they are. If you can acknowledge other people for who they are, that they're usually not in touch with or unwilling to acknowledge because they think it's egocentrism. But if you say it and you mean it and it's honest, it'll resonate and touch a place in them that'll actually accelerate their ability to overcome the illusion of their ego being unloveworthy. And I think it's one of the key things we're here to learn in the human experience is how to do that more consistently. Is go through life and see people as their level 4, even if they don't know what level 4 is, because we do it as parents with our children when we're good parents, where we see little Johnny as a this or a that, and we try to encourage them to build around that character model they have, because I think God gives us all different gifts, and I think the gifts are primarily the gifts in the realm of these qualities of humility, compassion, love, faith, truthfulness, all that. So see others as their level 4 values and treat them accordingly, regardless of what they think of themselves. And you will be doing good unto the world and reflecting God into the dark pool of their negative self story. And then let where that go where it goes without you being concerned of what it means about you or says about you. What are your
I think
thoughts?
you just gave both a lesson to the key of personal happiness and joy, and I think you just gave the key to the most successful ability of leadership. If you're a business leader, you've got a team. If we pay, in the business world, we pay tens of thousands, if not more, trying to learn leadership. Do that with your team,
Yeah.
and you won't have to manage their behaviors. You'll be watching them fulfill their promises to your organization.
Yeah.
It's unreal, Al, the depth of that. That if you can just set it aside and you can see that the level 4 values of that person and the fact that you are blessed to be involved in their life somehow. That's a blessing that they're in your life. It's not that they are obligated to be in your life. Everything changes.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
And what if we close the loop back to an earlier portion of this conversation, maybe the beginning, and said, what about that person out there that has moved out of your life?
Mhm.
Maybe it's that college friend you haven't talked to in 30 years. Maybe it's the girlfriend that broke up with you. Maybe it's the boyfriend that broke up with you. Maybe it's the boyfriend that cheated on you. Maybe it's the child that no longer wants to talk to you. Maybe it's the old business partner. What if you reached out without the need for them to even be willing to connect with you?
Right.
Maybe it's a letter, maybe it's an email, maybe it's a voicemail that just says, look, Judy or whoever, I know you weren't expecting to hear from me, and you probably don't know why I'm contacting you, but I wanted to let you know that I recognize that who you really are is an expression of love, kindness, and compassion. And for whatever reason, I wasn't able to acknowledge that and let you know that I acknowledged that when we were together. I apologize, but I realize we'll never probably talk to each other again, but I want you to know that I see your soul. I see who you really are. And I offer this to you so you can consider the possible truth of what I see and start to live in alignment with that consciously so you can be as happy as you deserve to be.
Mhm.
Even though we will no longer see each other ever again, I love you and I see you. Please see yourself.
Brilliant. And I think that is a great place for us to wrap up today's
Right.
podcast. That was beautiful, Al. I hope that those that are watching, that they experienced something from this today, that it has stimulated a thought of the beauty they can experience in life and give to others. So we're grateful for anybody that's watching. Al, love
Yeah.
you, brother. Thanks for
Yeah.
all the encouragement today. I'm
Love
always
you, brother.
all right. Everybody have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.